This is my true story. My husband left for work and said, "Don't touch the package on the table," his voice urgent and strange. I looked at the box and saw my name written on it in his handwriting, which made no sense at all. I shook it lightly to see what was inside, and something tapped back from within the box like it was alive. Then my husband came rushing back through the door, screaming for me to step away from it now. What he told me next about that package destroyed everything I thought I knew about the man I married. Before I tell you what happened, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story reaches more people. He said it from the doorway as he was leaving for work that morning, and his voice was sharp and urgent in a way I had never heard before in our 10 years of marriage. He said, "Don't touch the package on the table, and I'm serious. Don't go near it." I was standing in the kitchen in my pajamas, holding my coffee mug, and I looked over at our dining room table, confused because I didn't remember any package being delivered. There it was, sitting in the middle of the table, a medium-sized box wrapped in plain brown paper, like something you would mail through the post office. I called after him, asking what package and what was he talking about, but he was already out the door and down the front steps. I heard his car start in the driveway, and then he was gone driving away to work like he always did at 7:30 in the morning. I stood there staring at that box on my table with my coffee getting cold in my hand, wondering what the hell was happening in my own house. Why would there be a package on our dining room table that he told me not to touch? Why did his voice sound so strange and frightened when he said it? I walked slowly toward the dining room, still holding my coffee, and I circled around the table, looking at the box from different angles. It was about the size of a shoebox, maybe a little bigger, and it was wrapped carefully in brown paper that was taped at every single seam, like someone took a lot of time to make sure it was sealed properly. There was no return address anywhere on it, and no postal markings or shipping labels. It looked like it had been wrapped by hand and placed on our table by someone who had access to our house. My heart started beating faster as I got closer and saw something written on the top of the package in black marker. It was my name. My full name, written in letters I recognized immediately. It was my husband's handwriting, and I would know it anywhere after 10 years of seeing it on birthday cards and grocery lists and notes he left on the counter. The way he made his capital letters too big, and the way his lowercase a's always looked like O's. This was definitely his handwriting, which meant my husband had addressed this package to me and then told me not to touch it. Nothing about this made any sense, and I felt fear starting to creep up my spine. Why would he write my name on a package and leave it on our table and then warn me not to go near it? What could possibly be inside that was so dangerous or important that I couldn't touch it? I thought maybe it was a surprise gift for my birthday next month, but that didn't explain why he sounded so scared when he told me to stay away from it. I set my coffee mug down on the counter and walked closer to the table, keeping my hands at my sides, even though I desperately wanted to pick up the box and examine it. I bent down and looked at my name written in his handwriting, and I traced the letters with my eyes without touching them. He had used a thick black marker and pressed hard enough that the ink bled slightly through the brown paper in some places. My name was centered perfectly on the top of the box, like he had measured it carefully to make sure it was positioned just right. I walked around the table, slowly looking at the package from every side. The brown paper was wrapped tightly, with no wrinkles or loose spots, and the tape was placed in perfectly straight lines along all the seams. This wasn't something wrapped quickly or carelessly. This was done with extreme attention to detail, like he was making sure nothing could get in or out. There were no other markings anywhere on the package, no stamps or stickers or labels of any kind. Just my name on top in his handwriting and brown paper wrapped around whatever was inside. I reached out my hand and let it hover just above the surface of the box without actually touching it. I could feel my pulse racing and my breathing getting shallow because something about this whole situation felt deeply wrong. My husband had never acted like this before. Never left mysterious packages with strange warnings. Never sounded that frightened when he spoke to me. We had a normal, boring marriage where he went to work every day as an engineer and came home and we had dinner and watched television and went to bed. Nothing exciting or dangerous or mysterious ever happened to us. But now, There was this box on our table with my name on it, and I had no idea what was inside or why he didn't want me to touch it. Part of me thought I should just listen to him and leave it alone until he got home from work and could explain what was happening. But another part of me was burning with curiosity because it was sitting right there in my own house with my own name on it, and I couldn't just ignore it for 8 hours while he was at work. I decided I would just shake it very gently to see if I could hear what was inside without actually opening it or touching it with my bare hands. That seemed like a reasonable compromise between respecting his warning and satisfying my desperate need to know what was going on. I reached out slowly with both hands and picked up the box carefully like it was made of glass. It was heavier than I expected, solid and dense, like there was something substantial inside. I held the box in both hands and lifted it just a few inches off the table and gave it the tiniest, gentlest shake, barely moving it at all, just to see if I could hear anything shifting or rattling inside. I expected to hear the sound of something loose moving around, or maybe nothing at all, if whatever was inside was packed tightly. But what I heard instead made my blood turn to ice, and my hands start shaking so badly I almost dropped the box. There was a sound from inside, but it wasn't the sound of objects shifting or sliding around. It was deliberate and purposeful. Tap, tap, tap. 3 distinct taps, like someone knocking on a door from the inside of the box. Like something was responding to my movement. Like something alive was in there, reacting to being disturbed. I froze completely with the box still in my hands and my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I stood there, not breathing, waiting to see if the sound would happen again. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence, and I thought, maybe I imagined it, or maybe it was just something settling inside. Then it happened again. Tap, 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 tap. 4 taps this time, faster and more insistent, like whatever was inside was trying to communicate or trying to get out. I dropped the box back onto the table so fast that it made a loud thump, and I backed away, stumbling over my own feet. My whole body was shaking, and I felt like I might throw up or pass out or scream. What the hell was inside that box that could tap back when I shook it? Was there something alive in there, some kind of animal or device, or I didn't even know what? I backed all the way into the kitchen, keeping my eyes on the box the entire time, like it might explode or open on its own. My mind was racing, trying to come up with explanations that made sense, but nothing did. My husband wrote my name on a box and told me not to touch it, and now something inside was tapping, like it was responding to movement. This wasn't normal. This wasn't a birthday present or a surprise gift. This was something terrible and wrong and dangerous. I heard tires screeching in our driveway, and my heart jumped into my throat. I ran to the front window and saw my husband's car parked at a crazy angle, like he had slammed on the brakes and jumped out without even turning off the engine properly. The driver's door was hanging open, and he was running toward the house faster than I had ever seen him move. His face through the window was white as paper and covered in sweat, and his eyes were wide with terror. The front door burst open so hard it slammed against the wall, and my husband came running into the house, still wearing his work clothes, with his briefcase still in his hand, like he had turned around and driven straight back the second he left. He was breathing hard, and his face was dripping with sweat even though it was cool outside, and he looked at me, and then at the box on the table, and then back at me. He yelled, "Step away from it now," in a voice I had never heard him use before, loud and sharp, and filled with absolute terror that made my knees weak. He dropped his briefcase on the floor and ran across the room and grabbed my arm and physically pulled me backward into the kitchen, putting himself between me and that box on the dining room table. His grip on my arm was so tight it hurt, and I could feel him shaking as badly as I was. He spun me around to face him and grabbed both my shoulders, and his eyes were wild and desperate. He said, "Did you open it?" And his voice was shaking, and I shook my head. "No." He said, "Did you touch it, and tell me exactly what you did?" And I could see panic all over his face. I stammered that I just shook it, trying to hear what was inside, and that something tapped back, like it was alive or mechanical or I didn't know what. He cut me off with a string of curse words I had never heard him use in our entire 10 years together, and he let go of my shoulders and started running his hands through his hair and pacing back and forth in our kitchen like a caged animal. He kept saying, "Oh God, I told you not to touch it, I told you." And his voice was getting higher and more frantic. Then he stopped pacing suddenly and looked at me with eyes full of something I couldn't name. Something like guilt and fear and desperation all mixed together. He said, "That's not a package." And his voice cracked on the words. He said, "It's a trap, and I'm the one who built it." I felt my knees go weak, and I grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter to keep myself from falling to the floor. I said, "What are you talking about?" And my voice came out as barely a whisper because I couldn't get enough air into my lungs to speak properly. He looked at me, and I saw tears forming in his eyes and running down his face, and in our entire marriage I had never seen him cry. Not once. Not even at his father's funeral or when we lost the baby 5 years ago. But now he was crying and shaking and looking at me like his whole world was ending. He said, "We need to sit down, and I need to tell you everything." And his voice was breaking with every word. He pulled out a kitchen chair and told me to sit down, and I did, because my legs couldn't hold me up anymore, and I felt like I was going to collapse. He sat down across from me and put his head in his hands for a moment and took several shaky breaths like he was trying to gather the courage to speak. Then he looked up at me and said, 3 months ago, I got involved with some people and I made a terrible mistake. He said they were bad people, dangerous people, and I owed them money from a gambling debt I had been hiding from you for over a year. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach because I had no idea he was gambling or that he owed anyone money. He kept talking fast, like if he didn't get it all out right now, he would lose his nerve. He said the people he owed money to told him he could work off his debt by doing a job for them. He said they wanted him to build them something using his engineering skills, something that could hurt someone badly. He said at first he refused, but they threatened to hurt me and hurt him and destroy everything we had, so he agreed. He said he thought he could outsmart them by building something that looked real, but wouldn't actually work properly, and that way he could buy himself time to figure out how to get away from them. But he said they didn't trust him, so they made him test what he built and prove it worked before they would accept it. He said they made him demonstrate it on a practice target, and it worked exactly the way they wanted it to, and he realized he had just built something that could kill someone. His voice broke completely, and he put his face in his hands and sobbed like a child, and I sat there frozen, not knowing what to do or say or think. He said he had become the kind of person who built weapons for criminals, and he hated himself, but he didn't know how to get out of it without getting us both killed. He said the device sitting on our table right now was supposed to be picked up this morning by the people he owed money to, and they were going to use it to hurt someone. But he said last night he overheard them talking when they thought he couldn't hear, and he found out the truth about who the target was. He said they told him it was going to be used against some criminal or rival gang member, someone who deserved it. But he said he heard them laughing about how it was actually going to be mailed to a federal prosecutor's wife, an innocent woman with 2 young children who had nothing to do with any of this. He said they were going to mail it to her house, and when she opened it, thinking it was a normal package, it would go off and kill her. He looked at me with tears streaming down his face and said he couldn't do it. He couldn't let them turn him into a murderer of innocent people. He said all night he laid awake next to me while I was sleeping, trying to figure out what to do and how to stop this without getting us both killed. He said the people he was dealing with were connected to organized crime and they had killed people before, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill him and me if he betrayed them. But he said he also couldn't live with himself if he let them use what he built to murder a mother and destroy her family. So he came up with a desperate plan that he knew would probably destroy our marriage and his freedom, but it was the only way he could think of to save that woman's life. He said early this morning before I woke up, he took the device and wrapped it in brown paper and wrote my name on it and put it on our dining room table. He said he called the people he owed money to and told them there was a delay, that there was a problem with the mechanism and he needed another day to fix it. He said they were angry, but they agreed to wait until tomorrow morning to pick it up. He said he put it on our table with my name on it because he needed me to see it and know what he had done, but he couldn't risk me actually opening it because it was armed and functional and deadly. He said his plan was to warn me not to touch it and then come back home and tell me everything, and then turn himself into the police before the criminals could pick it up and use it. He said he would rather go to prison and lose everything than live knowing he helped murder an innocent woman. I sat there, trying to process what he was telling me, and my mind couldn't make sense of any of it. My husband, who went to work every day and paid our bills and mowed the lawn on weekends, had been building bombs for criminals. He had a secret gambling addiction and was in debt to dangerous people and had been lying to me for over a year. The man I thought I knew didn't exist, and sitting across from me was a stranger who had done terrible things and was now crying and confessing and asking me to understand. I asked him what exactly was inside that box, and he closed his eyes like the answer physically hurt him to say. He said it was an explosive device connected to a motion sensor and a timer mechanism. He said when I shook it a few minutes ago, I activated the motion sensor, which started a countdown. He looked at his watch, and his hands were shaking, and he said, "We probably have about 15 or 20 minutes before it detonates, and we need to get out of the house right now and call the police." He stood up fast and grabbed my hand, trying to pull me toward the door, but I jerked away from him and said, "No, we're not leaving until you tell me everything." He said there's no time and we need to go now. But I screamed at him that he owed me the whole truth after lying for a year and building a bomb in our house. He looked at me, and I could see him struggling with how much to tell me, but finally, he started talking again, fast and desperate, like the words were pouring out of him. He said they were supposed to pick up the device this morning at 8 o'clock before I even woke up. He said the plan was that he would leave it on the porch in a different box and they would take it and he would never see it again and he could pretend he didn't know what they were going to do with it. But he said last night around midnight, he got a call from one of them telling him to come to a meeting, and when he got there, they were drinking and celebrating and talking about their plan. He said that's when he heard them mention the federal prosecutor whose wife was the real target. He said they were laughing about how the prosecutor had been going after their organization for 2 years and putting their people in prison, and now they were going to send him a message by killing his wife in their own home. He said they talked about how she would open the package thinking it was something normal and her 2 kids might even be standing right there watching when it went off. He said in that moment he realized he couldn't go through with it no matter what happened to him. He said he thought about those 2 children, losing their mother because of something he built with his own hands, and he knew he would rather die than let that happen. So he came home and wrote my name on the box and put it on our table because he needed me to see what he had become and what he was involved in. He said he couldn't just tell me because I wouldn't believe him, or I would think he was exaggerating or having some kind of breakdown. He said he needed me to see the physical evidence of what he did and understand how serious this was. He said his plan was to warn me not to touch it and then turn around and come right back and confess everything and then call the FBI and turn himself in as a witness against the people who hired him. He said he was willing to go to prison for building the device, but he was going to make sure they couldn't use it to hurt anyone, and he was going to help the authorities take down the entire organization, even if it meant spending the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. I asked him again what the tapping sound was that I heard when I shook the box, and why it responded like something alive was inside. He wiped his face with his hands and said it was a motion sensor connected to a countdown mechanism that he designed specifically for this job. He said the way it works is that when the box is moved or shaken, the sensor detects the motion and activates a timer. He said the tapping sound I heard was the mechanism engaging and starting the countdown sequence, and each tap represented the timer clicking down toward detonation. He said he built it that way because the people who hired him wanted something that would give them time to get away after delivery. He said they wanted to be able to mail it or drop it off and then be far away when it actually went off, so there would be no way to connect them to it. He said the motion sensor meant that the timer wouldn't start until someone actually picked up and moved the package, which could be hours or even days after it was delivered. He said it was designed to give the target just enough time to open the package and look inside before it detonated. He looked at his watch again, and his face went even paler, and he said, "When I shook it about 10 minutes ago, I started a 20-minute countdown." He said we now had maybe 10 minutes left before the device went off with enough explosive force to destroy our entire dining room and probably kill anyone standing nearby. He said we needed to evacuate immediately and call the bomb squad and let them handle it, because if we tried to move it now or open it or tamper with it in any way, it would detonate instantly. I asked him if he could disarm it since he was the one who built it, and he shook his head and said no. He said he designed it with multiple fail-safes specifically to prevent tampering and make sure it couldn't be disarmed easily. He said if someone tried to open the box wrong or cut the wrong wire or disturb any of the internal mechanisms, it would trigger an immediate detonation. He said the only way to safely deal with it was to either let the timer run down in a controlled environment away from people or to use specialized equipment that he didn't have access to. He said his original plan, before I touched it, was to carefully transport it to an empty field or abandoned building and let it detonate safely where no one could get hurt. But he said now that the timer was activated, he couldn't move it without risking it going off in his hands or in the car. He said the motion sensor was extremely sensitive and any significant movement could trigger the backup detonation system. He pulled out his phone and showed me that he already had a number dialed and his thumb was hovering over the call button. He said he was calling the FBI right now and turning himself in and telling them everything about the people he worked with and the money he owed and what they made him build. He said he would give them names and addresses and account numbers and every piece of information he had about the criminal organization. He said he was going to cooperate fully as a witness and help them build a case that would take down everyone involved, even if it meant he would go to prison for a long time for his part in building the device. He looked at me with tears streaming down his face and said he knew this meant our marriage was probably over and I would probably hate him forever. He said he knew I would never be able to trust him again after finding out he had been lying for over a year and putting both of our lives in danger with his gambling and his debts. He said he understood if I wanted a divorce and wanted nothing to do with him after this. But he said he couldn't let them use what he built to kill an innocent person and turn him into a murderer. He said the federal prosecutor's wife had 2 young kids who needed their mother, and she had done nothing wrong and didn't deserve to die just because her husband was doing his job prosecuting criminals. He said if he let that happen, he would never be able to live with himself, and he would rather spend the rest of his life in prison than know he helped murder someone. He said at least this way he could maybe do something right and save a life and help put dangerous people behind bars, even if it cost him everything. I sat there looking at the man I married and realizing I didn't know him at all. He had kept enormous secrets from me and lied to my face every single day for over a year. He had gotten involved with criminals and built a weapon and put both of us in terrible danger. But he was also willing to sacrifice his freedom and our marriage and everything we built together to save a stranger's life. I didn't know if that made him a good person or a bad person, or just a deeply broken person who had finally found a line he wouldn't cross. He pressed the call button on his phone, and I heard it ringing, and he said, "We need to get out of the house right now while I talk to them." He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the front door, and we ran outside into the driveway just as someone answered his call. He started talking fast, telling them his name and address, and that there was an active explosive device in our house that would detonate in less than 5 minutes. He said he was the one who built it, and he was turning himself in, and he needed them to send a bomb squad immediately. Within minutes, our street was filled with police cars and fire trucks and emergency vehicles with lights flashing and sirens wailing. They evacuated our entire neighborhood, making people leave their homes in their pajamas and bathrobes and telling them to go at least 2 blocks away. A bomb squad arrived in a massive truck with specialized equipment, and they sent in a robot to examine the package on our dining room table. My husband was handcuffed and put in the back of a police car, but they kept asking him questions about the device and how it was built and how much time was left. He told them everything he could about the design and the timer mechanism and the fail-safes, and they decided it was too dangerous to try to disarm it in our house. Instead, they used the robot to very carefully pick up the box and transport it to a containment unit, which was basically a huge reinforced steel container designed to contain explosions. I watched from behind police barriers 2 blocks away as the robot moved slowly and deliberately, carrying that package with my name on it in my husband's handwriting. My heart was pounding the entire time, thinking it might go off and hurt someone. They got it into the containment unit and sealed it, and then moved the whole thing to an empty field about a mile away. We all waited, and my husband was standing next to the police car, still in handcuffs, watching everything happen. Then there was a massive boom that shook the ground beneath my feet even from a mile away, and I saw a cloud of smoke rise up from where they had placed the containment unit. The explosion was so powerful that car alarms started going off all down our street and windows rattled in their frames. My husband was arrested officially right there in our driveway, while federal agents photographed our house and went through every room looking for evidence. They seized his computer and his phone and boxes of documents, and they asked me hundreds of questions about what I knew and when I knew it. I told them the truth that I had no idea about any of this until this morning, and they seemed to believe me. They told me that my husband's cooperation had likely saved the life of the federal prosecutor's wife, who was immediately moved to protective custody with her children. Within 48 hours, the FBI raided locations across 3 states and arrested 17 people connected to the criminal organization my husband had been working with. My husband became a cooperating witness who testified at multiple trials over the next year. The prosecutor, whose wife was the intended target, personally thanked him for coming forward, even though it meant confessing to building the device in the first place. My husband was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole in 3 because of his cooperation and the fact that he stopped the attack before anyone was hurt. I testified at his sentencing hearing and told the judge about the package with my name on it and how he tried to warn me and how he chose prison over becoming a murderer. I told him he made terrible choices, but in the end, he did the right thing, even though it cost him everything. He's been in prison for 2 years now, and I visit him every month because the man who wrote my name on a bomb to stop himself from killing a stranger is still somewhere inside the man I married. He just lost his way for a while and found it again before it was too late. He told me not to touch the package with my name on it in his handwriting, and when I shook it, something tapped back, and he came rushing in, screaming for me to step away because he'd built a bomb for criminals, then sabotaged his own work by putting it on our table, unable to become a murderer, even if it meant destroying our life together.